Kate, the time machine teacher, and on this channel we talk about all things AP World History. If that sounds like something you're interested in, please subscribe and don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a thing. On today's video, we will be covering how to explain your documents for the DBQ. There are 4 types that we will be going over, and then I will go over how to work it into your DBQ. So grab your notebooks, let's go. The first way to explain a document is purpose. The questions that you want to ask yourself in order to find the purpose of a document is, what is the purpose and why is that important to understanding the document? The why part is super important. Oftentimes, students will just answer what the purpose is of the document, but not explain why that's important to know. The why part is oftentimes within the document or digging deeper into the document to decode it and understand it. For example, if you're reading a document that is coming from an ambassador of another country about something that's going on in a foreign country and he's sending it back to his government, the purpose would be to inform his government what is going on in that foreign country. Why is that important that we know that? Well, it may be within the document, he may talk something about how these customs are strange or weird or different because he's an outsider. So you might be able to pull that and say, the reason this is important to know is because he is an outsider to this community and doesn't understand the customs, and that's clear in the way that he writes the document. The second way to explain a document is point of view. The questions you ask yourself to find point of view is, who is the author, what does the author believe, and why does the author believe it? The why part is often outside the document. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're reading a document written by a woman about women's rights and the right to vote be equal to men. You would say the point of view of the author, insert the author's name, is that she believes that women should be equal to men and be able to vote. That's your what she believes part. Then you're answering why she believes this. You could say something like, she believes this because she is female who is educated and feels that her opinion is just as important as a man, and therefore she should be able to have a right to vote. Now, here's the thing. She might not feel this way if she weren't a woman, right? That's the part outside the document that affects her point of view. If it were a man writing that, and saying that women shouldn't be equal because their role is at home, then his point of view is affected by the fact that he is male. Now, that doesn't mean that a male can't agree that women should be equal, because that is possible. But your point of view is often shaped by things that happen outside of what you feel about something. For example, if you are against abortion, you may have had a personal experience with that in your life or someone in your family. If you're for it, maybe you had a personal experience that would sway your opinion towards that. Or gun rights, or anything that you can think of that you would agree or disagree with. That's all shaped by your personal point of view. There are several things that can affect an author's point of view. Religion. Definitely religion. If you're looking in the source and you see that someone is a specific religion, that can usually go towards their point of view. Their social status. Rich people are going to think differently than poor people. It just is the case because they have different experiences. Gender is definitely one that you can use for point of view. Those are all really big key parts of point of view that you can look for as you're reading through your documents. And when you see it in the source, underline it and write point of view beside it. Just don't forget to answer that last part. First answer what they believe and then why they believe it. That's the most important part to point of view and one that students often miss. The third way to explain is audience. This one you would ask yourself, who is the audience and why is that important to understanding the document? For example, if the audience is the king and you are writing to the king, the way that you write the document may be different than the way you might write to a friend. So how does that affect the tone of the document? If you're one of my students, you know how much I love to search for antique treasures and cool vintage finds. One of my favorite vintage finds is this book from 1774. I found it in an old bookshop here in Houston, and I was so excited just at the simple fact of how old it was. But when I got it home, I realized I had found a really unique treasure. This is entitled The Annual Register of 1774, and it's basically the history of Europe from 1774. Let me give you a little bit of context. We know context is our favorite thing in AP World History, right? So the context is that this book is the history of all of Europe in 1774, so the whole European continent. Apparently, they've written these annual histories for a very long time. So I say to myself, 1774 is 2 years before the Declaration of Independence. I wonder if there's anything in this book about what was going on between the colonists and the king. And guess what? There is! What? Imagine my surprise. There are 2 letters, not just one, but 2 letters that the colonists wrote to the king. There are probably more, but these are the 2 that were put into this book and preserved for us. It starts out a petition of the American Congress to the king. To the king, most excellent majesty, most gracious sovereign, we are your majesty's faithful subjects of the colonies. This starts out much different than the Declaration of Independence, right? So, the purpose of this and the audience are much different than the Declaration of Independence. It lists all the colonies, and then it says, by this our humble petition, beg leave to lay our grievances before your throne. What are they doing? They're sucking up, right? Their purpose was to lay their grievances before his throne and to try to get him to fix stuff, right? That was their purpose. So they're writing this with a completely different tone than they will later write the Declaration of Independence when they want to break away from England. This is just so exciting. So the purpose here is to get him to listen to them. Therefore, they're going to write with more of a gracious tone and a suck-up tone, basically. They're trying to get him to listen. Now, the audience in this one, as well as the Declaration of Independence, is the same. However, the purpose is what makes the tone different. Oftentimes, purpose and audience will have very similar reasons why. So you can't double dip on the DBQ. You don't want to do purpose and audience for the same document if they're very similar. Because, for example, I said the purpose here was to get him to listen to their problems, and so they're going to be very gracious in the way that they ask for that. Audience here, the audience is the king. Why is that important to know? Well, because they're calling him the most gracious sovereign. They're trying to get him to listen to their pleas. So it's very similar. Therefore, if I were doing this document on the DBQ, I would just write purpose or audience, but not both. Now, compared to the Declaration of Independence, the purpose changes, right? Because in the Declaration of Independence, their purpose is to break away from England. So therefore, their tone is going to be way different. It's going to be way stronger, and they're not trying to suck up because they're basically letting the king know that they're done. It's a breakup letter. Audience between the 2 is the same. What you could say for the audience for the Declaration of Independence is that the audience is the king, and that's important to know because since they were trying to break ties with England, they're being very forceful in the way that they speak to him, despite the fact that they should be respectful as his subjects. However, they no longer want to be his subjects, and so all respect was lost, or something like that. That's just a quick example of how sometimes purpose and audience can be very similar and can change based on the document. The last way to explain a document is the historical situation of the document. So, for example, once again, with the Declaration of Independence, since that's what everyone knows, that is written in 1776 when the colonists are ready to break away from England. So the historical situation of that is that things in the colonies weren't going so well between the English and the colonists. They didn't feel like they had any rights, and they didn't have any voice in Parliament. The king wouldn't let them have a voice in Parliament, and this really upset them because they felt like as British subjects they should have a voice. All of that goes with historical situation because it affects the document. It pushes them to break away from England. If it wouldn't have been for that, maybe they wouldn't have written the Declaration of Independence. So for historical situation, you want to ask yourself, what is going on at the time the document was written, and how does that affect the document? You could say, for example, the historical situation of the Declaration of Independence is that the colonists weren't happy with the fact that they had no say in Parliament, and the king wouldn't include them in the lawmaking for the colonies. Therefore, that prompts them to write the Declaration of Independence, where they break away from England and start the American Revolution. You're explaining what was going on and how that affects the document. Then I would even take it maybe one sentence further and say, because they are angry and they are breaking away from England, their tone is very adamant in the document in the way in which they speak to the king. Somehow bring it back and tie it into the document. Those are the 4 ways that you can explain. Now, how do we put this in our DBQ? I would suggest that every time you write a DBQ, you write it in the same way so that you get used to writing it. Context, thesis, break your thesis down into topic sentences. Then within your paragraphs, do your describes, supports, explain. You don't have to explain every single document though. So if you don't have enough information about the author, or you maybe don't understand the document enough, then skip that document. Go on to the next one. Go on to the one that gives you information in the source part that will help you explain that document. If you're skipping the explain, fine, just go on to the next describe. If you're not, put it right after supports within your paragraphs. Just don't forget to answer the why part. The why part is so important. Now, if you're running out of time at the end of the DBQ and you haven't done your explains, throw them in there. It's an easy point to get because it's just a couple sentences. So don't let your time run out without putting those in there. Always throw in a couple of extra just in case you get it wrong or you forget to explain why. The key thing though is to remember the questions that I went over in the first part of this video so that you don't forget the parts of explain. And that wraps up this video today. I hope that my explanation of explaining the documents helped you understand how to do it a little bit better. However, if you still have questions, please feel free to email me. I've got my email address right down there for you. I would love to hear from you and give you any feedback that I can. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.